The biggest lie you've been told is just keep your head down. Your work's going to speak for itself and play the long game.
It's a lie. Your work doesn't speak for itself. Jenny Wood had a spectacular 18-year career at Google and wrote the book, Wild Courage, Go After What You Want and Get It.
We don't lean into these traits, selfish, shameless, manipulative, bossy, reckless, because of our fear of being judged, that we might be that label.
Jenny thinks that there are specific traits that hold people back from really being successful. In this conversation, Jenny says the quiet part out loud. So I hope you're paying attention. We discuss how to play corporate politics without being an a-hole, why self-promotion doesn't have to feel inauthentic, and why sometimes you need to fake it to make it. Let's jump in.
Jenny, you have this Google document. And in this Google document, you took all of these notes for yourself about how you got promoted, and you had this meteoric rise and amazing career at Google. And on this Google document, I wanted to ask you, like, when you shared it with people, what was the thing that people got most excited by or most worked up by?
Oh, interesting. So I think it was the specificity of it. And I think because I have never been in an HR role or a people operations role or a learning and development role, and I was always in the business and was sharing these career development tips or these success tips for Googlers, I think that people liked that it was no BS. So I'm like racking my brain to remember the actual bullets I shared, but I remember a couple. One was if you're in an interview for an internal, interview or anywhere, it said, notice the eye flick. When your interviewer's eye flicks to the upper right corner or the bottom right corner, that means they're checking the time. And that means you're being too long-winded on this particular interview answer. And so that eye flick, which we all see, right? Like we see the eye flicking in any meeting, any Zoom meeting that we're in, we see that eye flick and we know they're checking the time. Use that as a signal to wrap up that answer and move on to the next one. And then for your next interview, practice tightening that answer. So it's that level of specificity that I think people globbed onto, as opposed to something you might expect to read, which would be like, something more ivory tower or more just kind of standard interview advice or success advice,
don't be long-winded.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly the antidote I was trying to go for.
Oh, I love that. I think about that often, actually. I think of like when people look down and they're like checking their email.
Yes,
so it's
right?
I'm like, sure. I'm boring you because you're checking, but I love that. And it's funny. One of our other guests, Tara Schuster, who you may have met, she had the same, I feel like all great ideas start in like open-ended Google Docs. Yeah, she was, she had a very difficult childhood and she basically woke up one day in her mid-20s. She's like, I'm going to reparent myself. And she just started taking notes for herself in a Google Doc. And it turned into like a 400-page document that then turned into a book. So cool. There are some parallels here. And so one of the things you wrote early in the book is to be successful, you have to act like you already are.
Exactly.
And I read that and I'm going to lay my story into this conversation a bunch because I come from this kind of very like timid immigrant background where I'm told to not speak up. Yeah. And it's almost like the say, like be 120% the thing before you even talk about it. And so like, they talk about that a lot in kind of gender things where men will say like they're 80% confident. They'll be like, I know the answer. And women will wait till they're, over 100% confident. So I grew up in this kind of immigrant, timid, play small, be small mindset. And when I see something like to be successful, act like you already are, I kind of get this like fake it till you make it aphorism, so to speak. That I'm like, I don't know how that sits with me. And so what's the tension there between like owning your future you and faking it till you make it, which has more negative connotation?
Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching Now back to the video.
Yeah, well, I think there's tension if it's inauthentic. There's tension if you don't have the goods to back it up. But so many people, like, this is what breaks my heart, is so many people are talented and experienced and skilled and well networked, and yet they still get in their own way because they're living in fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of judgment of others. And so the tension is that you don't want to fake it if you don't have the goods to back it up. But so many people have the goods to back it up, but don't speak up. Or, to me, a practical example of, to be successful, you have to act like you already are, or a success mindset comes before success itself, is like, for example, I had this very senior person I was working with, and I could have just kowtowed down to him and said, like, you're so amazing, and it's such a privilege to work with you. But for the very first time I met him in person, we walked out of this meeting together, and I was like, hey, can I give you some candid feedback? And he's like, sure, a little bit caught off guard. And I gave him some real candid feedback about his performance in that rounds table where he was talking to like a bunch of underlings. And my hands were shaking when I said it. But then he looked at me and he's like, Jenny, nobody's honest with me like this. People, when you get really high up in a company, people don't tell you the truth. They brown nose, they placate, they kiss up to you. And I wasn't doing that. And I was thinking of myself as an equal partner with in a value exchange, right? So by having that success mindset, like acting like a peer of his would, that was going to give him feedback, or acting like, a manager might give him feedback, to me, that was putting myself in a place of like, I'm already successful. I'm already confident in the fact that I'm a budding leader at this company. And therefore I'm going to help you. Like, it genuinely came from a place of wanting to help. And it was risky, right? Reckless is one of the 9 traits in Wild Courage. It was reckless in the best way. I took a risk. But his response was like, I stopped him in his tracks. Yep. And then from that day on, he would email me after presentations and be like, Jenny, I know you'd be honest with me. How did that go? How did that land with the team? Do you think I presented this reorg in a thoughtful and but also realistic way? And then he invited me out to Mountain View, California, to do this half-day coaching session with him, which is like not the norm. That is like not what was happening. And I think it was because I put myself in a position of like, I'm a force to be reckoned with, and I am a budding leader, and I have the confidence to, have this success mindset, kind of acting as if I'm a peer of yours, even though I unequivocally was not. He was my boss's boss. I mean, I was already a senior leader at the company, but he was like very senior.
And when you approached, was it him?
Him, yeah.
When you approached him, did you kind of, because I could see myself in that situation where I would kind of play down. I'd be like, I almost like timid, like, is it okay if I give you feedback and this? Or did you like own it? You're like, just like, boom, I want to tell you this in that specific case.
I probably led in with, can I share some feedback with you? Yep. I don't know that I would have had, because all of these traits, these 9 traits, have trait traps, right? When you take them too far and you are classically reckless or classically shameless or classically manipulative, right? That's not what we're going for here. You want to be smart and thoughtful and apply these 9 traits in a sane and savvy way. But I will say, Khe, that, so I think, yes, I had some kind of softish lead in and maybe sought permission. But I will say there's also a time I can think of where I totally blew it, where I came in way too strong and I had the wrong environment. And there was this new leader who I was dotted lining into, and he had replaced this other guy who frankly was better and like was much more engaging with the team. And this guy was like always sitting behind a closed door in his office and never checked in, never walked the floor. And I remember he was pouring cereal in the kitchen at Google at one point. And I was like, hey, I really think that you're going to have a more successful first 90 days if you walk the floor more. And he just like did not respond well. And he went back to his office, closed the door, a big thump. I just didn't, I don't think I won any points with him that day. So you win some, you lose some. And I've definitely gotten my wrist slapped by taking these traits too far and having too much wild courage.
Oh, wow. Okay. So let's just lay out the traits. I think I know, you know them all by heart, just so we could like set the stage for our listeners.
Yeah.
What are these 9 traits?
Yeah. So weird, selfish, shameless, obsessed, nosy, manipulative, that's a spicy one, brutal, reckless, and bossy.
Okay. Which is, as we were saying, we're friends. And as I was telling you before, I'm like, when I first started to read the book, I'm like, is she being controversial just for the sake of being controversial? You know, it's like so many books have the word fuck in the title now.
Sure.
I'm like, okay, it's kind of like losing its appeal now.
Yeah.
Like it was cool when Mark Manson did it, but
Sure.
you know, not version like 10 and 11. And then as I read more and more of the book, I was like, oh shit, she's saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
And I honed in on a few, and the ones that I wanted to talk about were, let's actually jump straight to manipulative, because I think what I love about you and this book is like everything's hyper practical.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just this like ivory tower pontificating.
No.
It's like, look at their eyes. Are they checking the time? You are boring the crap out of them. Move on. Right.
Totally.
And what I loved about the manipulative chapter is that you talk about leaning into politics.
Yeah.
Internal politics, corporate politics.
Right.
And very few people say that. People are like, oh, you stay above the fray of like, you stay above the fray, or just let your goodness or your intellect or your skills. I mean, how many people do we know that are so skilled, like so talented, but because they either refused to play the politics or they failed to see how politics work, got like stuck in some corner of an organization like Google or BlackRock, right?
100%. Yeah. And I mean, the biggest lie you've been told is just keep your head down. Your work's going to speak for itself, and play the long game, because, you know, eventually you'll get promoted. Eventually you'll get a raise. Eventually you'll get that golden watch, right? You just work hard, don't unionize, and we will take care of you. But like, no, the world is changing, right? It's a big competitive world with 8 billion people, and being mindful of who you need to, like, who's pulling the strings, and then go pull theirs. Like that is a good move, right? So first, let me just define manipulative. It's the courage to build relationships through empathy and to leverage your influence. Because if you are too scared to tap into your ability to influence and use your power, then you're just leaving more room for the unscrupulous few to run the show who are actually manipulative. So in all reality, whether you're selling a product or an idea or even yourself, the ability to win friends and allies and partners and supporters is all about mutual benefit. So figure out what they want and go get it for them. So let's be really practical here. Here are a couple of ways this plays out. And let's start with politics, because you mentioned that. All right. So old news, managing up, right? Like we've heard it a million times. What I think is more counterintuitive is managing higher and managing diagonally. So managing higher is meeting your boss's boss twice a year. So like higher on the org chart, right? So your boss is above you, their boss is even higher. So meet your boss's boss twice a year. If you're at a tiny company of 60 people, meet the CEO, right? Like go beyond the relationship with your boss, because oftentimes decisions like raises, promotions are made by committee. And the last thing you want is, you know, your boss saying your name in a promotion conversation and everybody saying, Khe Hy, I'm not sure I know who that is, right? You want people who can advocate for you behind closed doors. Let's call them sponsors, right? The difference between a mentor and a sponsor is a mentor speaks to you, a sponsor speaks about you behind closed doors, like I just said. Yeah. So that's manage higher. Then manage diagonally. So again, look at an org chart. Your boss is above you. Their peers are to the right and left of them on an org chart. So with respect to you, that's a diagonal relationship. Let's say your boss has 7 peers. Pick 2 or 3 of them that hold influence, and you know who they are, right? It's not about their title. It's not necessarily about their size of their org. You know who holds the power and who holds the influence. You can write it down right now on a piece of paper, right? Who at BlackRock, had the most influence. BlackRock is a gambling town in Boulder, near Boulder here. So, you know, that's managed diagonally. Pick 2 or 3 of them, build genuine relationships, not 2 weeks before promotions are decided, a year before that, when you can genuinely offer the opportunity to collaborate on a project. You could have a genuine mentorship relationship. You can ask for 15 minutes to present in their team meeting. You can ask if there's someone on their team who's more junior that you could mentor, and people who both have influence and you also just like and respect, because you're going to be miserable if you're only going for who holds the power and not the intersectionality of who holds the power and who's cool. Or, I mean, you know, cool, who you like and connect with genuinely. So that's 2, manage higher and manage diagonally. 2 ways to play politics and to be manipulative.
I love that. I think it's funny. One of the first blog posts I ever wrote when I left BlackRock, so this was 10 years ago, I had something called 360 networking.
Yeah.
It's like very similar. It was like manage up. I didn't think of the double step. That's brilliant. And I have another question about that.
Sure.
But I had the diagonal, I had the lateral, and then I had to manage down too, where you kind of like build this, like, even if you're not someone's boss, you build this groundswell of influence with young folks, and you become like, I mean, that like, I remember in 2008, I had all these young folks who didn't report to me, but I was an informal mentor of theirs. They're not firing the person that all the young people go to for mentorship, whether it's formal or informal.
I mean, genius. Yes. This is exactly what this book is all about. This is exactly what Wild Courage is all about. Nobody gave you permission, to informally take on all these mentees. And it's not like mentorship is an informal thing anyway. So it's not the kind of thing that you ever like get labeled like you are an official mentor. Well, some companies have that. Like Google has official mentoring programs. And if your company has that, absolutely sign up for one of those as soon as you think you want to rise to be a leader, or you just want to have the genuine enjoyment of mentoring people because it feels it's wonderful. But not only are they not going to fire the person who is like the de facto mentor, you are sending a signal when people leadership roles open, because people aren't stupid. People know that you're doing this mentorship. They're going to think of you as a leader. They're going to think of you as an advisor. They're going to think of you as someone they can go to for strategic decision making, because you're sending a signal by the actions you take without anyone giving you permission. Right? You're giving yourself permission to take on leadership roles, but people notice these things factor in to you getting more senior projects. They factor into you going and representing the company as a leader because they see you as a leader already internally. And it's so funny you called that 360-degree management. This section was called either 360-degree management or 360-degree influence before we renamed it to something else.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, there were so many of these traits that I saw. I was like, oh, I mean, I'm 10 years removed from corporate.
Sure.
I'm starting to get some cobwebs in my my internal corporate strategy game. But
it goes away quickly.
I remember that. I remember that.
And can I add one more thing here? Because I think it's so critically important. Please. And it goes back to the lie that you've been told that your work will speak for itself. And that's how you get ahead, because it's not. 50% of your job is doing your job, being a good coder if you're a coder, being a good salesperson if you're selling, being a good, spreadsheet analyzer if you're an analyst. I'm so excited about the ideas that I'm talking quickly. I'm going to slow down. So 50% of your job should be doing the actual work, and 50%, not a single percentage point less than 50% should be communicating about your work, communicating up to the people above you, communicating down, whether you're a manager or not, as you just indicated, and communicating across to your peers in marketing and legal and sales and engineering and product management and all the other places, to make sure the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, because that's what leaders do. Leaders make sure all the ducks are in a row, make sure everyone's swimming in the right direction, the same direction. And so if you signal that you are an exceptional communicator to all these other people internally, that is what is going to make people say, put this kid in charge.
Yep. You're spot on. So I want to ask another practical question where, because I go back to that like timid part of like, do I shoot my shot or not? So let's say you do that manager skip meeting, or so you meet your boss's boss, and they might know you. They probably know you by name. They might have sat in some meetings with you, but you're not really communicating with them regularly or ever.
Sure.
How do you, a lot of people in that situation, they come to me and they're like, what would I talk to them about?
Oh my gosh.
Is this like, tell me about your kids, or is it, what's the vision for Google from your seat? How do you coach someone on the, what do you talk about to someone you don't have? There's like the pretty big power imbalance.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I am so beyond thrilled that you asked this question, because a dear friend of mine just wrote a newsletter about this, and it's slightly different than how I talk about it in the book. But I shared with him that I'm actually going to take a slightly different angle, but it's still going to answer your question. I think that because it can be intimidating to do this, the onus is to some extent on the leader to not just say, I have an open door policy, to make it very, very easy and lower the bar for people to come talk to this person. So here's what I did at Google as an executive. I didn't just say, I'm available anytime. because people still will feel like, well, she doesn't really mean that. She doesn't really want me to set up time with her, but I genuinely did. So I had office hours every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., 3 20-minute slots, and it was on my entire org's calendar. And in the invite, it said, I literally just pulled this up. It says, please sign up for a 20-minute office hour slot whenever you'd like. These are available each Tuesday. Below are ideas of what we can discuss. No need for prep work or fancy slides. Again, I'm lowering the bar to make people feel more comfortable doing this. Because by the way, this was like my favorite hour of the week. I would learn what was going on the ground. I'd learn how the customers were really reacting. I'd learn about what was tricky on team dynamics. So below are ideas of what we can discuss. 1, a project you're excited about. 2, what keeps you up at night regarding work. Number 3, how are things going with a customer? Number 4, a roadblock I can remove. Number 5, a strength or skill you're proud of. Number 6, a skill you want to develop. Number 7, something fun you did this weekend. See you there, Jenny. And that was in their calendar every Tuesday. So I'm doing a couple things here. I am making it very obvious every Tuesday. I'm reminding them every Tuesday that like, oh, this is in their calendar. Maybe they didn't have an issue to bring me 3 months ago, but maybe they do right now. And this is an invitation to do it. So let's say you don't have a manager who, or a VP who like puts this out so proactively like I did, right? I recognized how intimidated
like 99% of the managers in the world.
Okay, fair. But even by my sharing that, I hope it gives you some ideas of how much your manager values the perspective that you have, even if you're 22 and right out of college. You can still apply you can grab any one of those 7 ideas I just shared and just proactively email their admin and say, hey, could I grab 20 minutes with XYZ VP and talk about this thing? You don't need fancy slides. Now, what I will say is be smart about it. So even though I did say, come talk about something fun you did this weekend, did that impress me as much as someone who brought a strength they were proud of, a skill they wanted to develop, and 3 slides from a previous customer meeting that they wanted to customer meeting that they wanted to present to me and show me their skills and their chops? Yeah, I would say that would knock it out of the park.
So much good stuff here. I think about one day we have to have just a conversation about just this specific topic because I'm obsessed with this topic. But I remember this quote. I could never actually re-find it online, so maybe it's just a myth. But someone who said, "Well, I have a chance to meet Bill Gates, but like I'm 20 years old.
Yeah.
Like, what can I talk to Bill Gates about?"
Yes.
And the response that either Bill Gates said or someone else said is like, "Well, you have something that Bill Gates will never have, which is the perspective of a 20-year-old."
Exactly. And
I really think about that.
Yes. And you can say, oh, here's how the millennial audience would react to our products, or just like the fact that they're up in an ivory tower and they do not know what's going on the ground, whether you're 20 or you're 27 or you're 42 and you're meeting with someone who's 60, right? So you're always going to be closer to the actual business and the customer than they ever will be, because they're dealing with like a bunch of things that are very high level. They don't know the details. And so I think of this, like, again, think of yourself as an equal partner with a value exchange. And that's the same reason I gave that person the feedback who responded really well to it. But again, like, so I love that line about Bill Gates. He doesn't have the perspective of a 20-year-old. There are also things you can gift. So I talk about reciprocity, generosity, right? So, when you're generous to someone, even if they're 30 years older than you, they're going to want to give back to you. So a great example of this is, yes, you have the perspective of someone right out of college. Let's say you listened to a podcast last week and it was good. Share that podcast with them. Share an article. Again, it elevates you in their eyes as not someone who's like, oh my gosh, what can you teach me, old wise sage, right? First of all, your senior leader is not some wizard behind the curtain with all the answers. Like, they're making it up half the time, just so you know, right?
And they don't see themselves as an old wise sage.
Yeah, exactly. They see themselves with like tons of imposter syndrome, worried whether they're doing right by the team. My biggest fear as an exec at Google was, honestly, what does my team think of me? Am I a good leader? Am I making decisions decisively, but also including all the perspectives of the team? So if you come and share your perspective, that gives me a gift as the leader of like how I can be a better leader to the team. So bring them a podcast, bring them an article you read, send them a book on Amazon for $29, send them Wild Courage, right?
Totally.
Like, these are all things that you can share. And you are then seen in their eyes, not as somebody who's just, like being a sponge and absorbing all of their wisdom. They're starting to see you as someone they can learn from. Do you know how many 20-year-olds I learn from every day, Khe?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I take about one call a week from someone who's like under 20.
Yeah.
And I let them ask me questions the whole 28 minutes. And then the last 2 minutes, I ask them, I have the same question I ask
What's
them.
the question?
Same series of questions. So the first one is, when you wake up, tell me the order of the apps that you open. Because I really kind of want to understand like their behavioral patterns.
Yeah.
The number of people that say YouTube is mind blowing, first of all, which is like, as a 45-year-old, I'm like, I feel bad if I open YouTube before 4 p.m. You know?
Right. Unless it's work related.
Exactly. Then I ask them where do they get their news? Again, shocking answers for a 45-year-old.
Where do they get their news? Yeah, I'm also 45 or about to be 45 in a few weeks.
A lot of YouTube, a lot of podcasts, and TikTok. It's like kind of like the obvious, but like you read about it in the news, but to be like, oh yeah, you see the statistics, like 65% of people get their news from TikTok. But when someone's like, I get my news from TikTok, like it hits a little bit differently. Yeah. And then I ask them like who their favorite influencers are, like depending on what the conversation was. Sure. The other thing on reciprocity too is like fun little stories. That's how RadReads started. Tell me. It was 5 curated news stories, like articles. And it was my little way of adding a bit of value to your day. Yeah. Right. And I was leaving Wall Street, and, this was, you left Google a little bit ago, but I was leaving Wall Street. I was like, how can I have a touch point? Sure. With peers and people above me. Yeah. Not just people, less senior than me. And I'm like, well, if I just add a little bit of value. Exactly. And, I'm prepping the 489th issue of RadReads. And here's the thing. You've got to lower the bar on what that value needs to be. Mm-hmm. Like when you're going in and talking to your boss, or even just like, sure, a boss is a good example because you've probably got a weekly meeting with them. Adding value does not mean that you've solved the customer CSAT problem by improving it 12%. It could literally be a curation. Like, how hard was it to curate 5 articles that people might enjoy? Like, you didn't have to write from scratch. A random AI use case. Exactly. Right. Like, that's what I tell people today. So we've talked about kind of the positive side of politics. Let's talk about the ugly side of politics. And people always ask me, and I want to hear how you approach it. They would say to me, Khe, you're a really nice guy. How did you survive in such a cutthroat industry like Wall Street? And I said, well, I'm a really nice guy, but if you tried to knife me, I would fucking kill you. So I would kind of like always walk around with my head on a pivot, on a swivel, just to be like this person. Cause like that, there was one example where you said, you're like, oh, you're the hub of influence for mentoring. Yeah. Well, guess what? Everyone would try to poach the people that I would mentor and then take credit for their development. I'm like, no. Yeah. Like, that's not going to work for me. Yeah. Because they're bad actors. For right? Sure. And they're either bad actors because they are inherently bad. Usually they're bad just for reasons that are beyond their control. Yeah. How do you deal with that? Yeah. So I think I think the real issue, I think the question behind the question is how do you not become actually manipulative? Like, Jenny, if I take this advice and you say to be selfish and shameless and reckless and manipulative, how do I not become a monster? And that's where I address this with trait traps. And I say, you can take it too far. So what's classically manipulative? Lying, cheating, stealing, throwing people under the bus, being two-faced, saying one thing to one person and another thing to another person. But there's so much in between those activities and, being a bad actor. And the people who just like don't advocate for themselves, or like, here's a really good example. This happened yesterday. Gretchen Rubin has a huge newsletter. She's, been a doll and helping support me on this book. And so she said, I'd love to share this in my newsletter. I did a Q&A with her. It's written. There are 5 questions. The last question, and like, I'm saying something that is like the quiet thing that other people wouldn't say, but I'm going to say it out loud. And it's not bad, but I would say it's selfish and shameless and a little bit manipulative. There are 5 questions, things like, what's your motto? What is something that keeps you productive or healthy or happy, right? Questions like that. And the 5th question is, what's a book that you've read recently that's inspired you? You can answer some of these questions or all of these questions. And the point of me being in her newsletter is to promote my book. So I opted to not answer that question because if someone's going to buy a book that day, I don't want them to buy Oprah Winfrey's book, right? Like, I want them to buy my book. Yeah. So was it selfish that I didn't answer that question because I don't want people to click on that link? I want them to click on the link to my book instead. Was it shameless because
I'm really having a strategic eye toward, getting people excited about my book and my book alone in that newsletter. So sure, call it that. But like, am I harming anybody? Absolutely not. They gave me permission to answer as many questions or as few questions as I want. It was strategic. Call it manipulative, call it, call it a game of a little bit of chess, but I feel really good about that decision. And I don't think it's harmed anybody. That's the barometer. Are you harming anybody, including yourself?
Do you, with your boys, what's your policy? Have you ever talked to them about white lies?
Oh, interesting. Okay. So my kids are, you've stumped me here, Khe. No, I don't think I have, but
you will soon.
I will soon. Yeah. I mean, I could take guidance from you because I do talk about a white lie in the book. A really fun manipulative story is when I was traveling to Austin to give a keynote, and Vanessa Van Edwards, who I so admire, she's a wonderful author who wrote Captivate and Cues. She lives in Austin. I emailed her. I said, Vanessa, I'd love to meet with you. I'm there Tuesday through Thursday. Could we grab coffee? And she wrote back, she's like, oh, what are the chances? Those are the exact dates that I'm flying out for a keynote. I fly out right when you fly in. Or that same day. And I said, what time is your flight? Maybe I can meet you at your gate or, have a cup of coffee right there. And she said, my flight's at 3 p.m. Now, I wasn't supposed to arrive until 6 p.m., but I quickly changed my flight to arrive at 1 p.m. And I wrote back, I said, perfect. I get in at 1. That is perfect timing. What are the odds? So kind of a white lie. I fessed up to her afterwards. She thought it was hilarious. And now it's a great story that's in the book. But, was that a white lie? Sure. But, liar, liar, pants on fire. I thought it was really smart.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a fascinating, that's why I thought about it with kids. Cause I'm like, I think it kind of captures what I love about your book is that you would tell a kid lying is bad.
Right.
But you don't actually mean that. Right. Cause then you would never jaywalk, right? You'd say never break rules. Right.
Right.
And so I think there's this like really subtle, and obviously kids their brains are still being formed and they're not battle tested. So there's a line that, needs to be drawn with anything. But I think it's like I decided to tell my daughter that it was okay to tell white lies in very specific cases. And then we kind of walk through the different scenarios. And I think that's the nuance that you bring in your writing. So.
Yeah. And I definitely we haven't specifically talked about white lies because I'm nervous to have that conversation because it is extraordinarily nuanced. And, at 7 and 9, I don't know that I think they're probably ready for it soon, but they do know the 9 traits of wild courage. And so we do oftentimes talk in the house about bossy, manipulative, brutal, reckless, selfish. And selfish is a real interesting one. Like, for example, or shameless is kind of interesting too, because, my daughter walked into the bagel shop the other day. They were out of the kind she liked. And she said, okay, I said, do you want chocolate chip instead? She's like, no, I don't like chocolate chip, Mom. But I know that she does. And she's like, I'll have plain. And we walked out of the bagel shop and she's like, Mom, as you know, like I do like chocolate chip, but I didn't want the people in the bagel shop to hear me say that because it seems like a really babyish bagel flavor.
Oh.
She's 7. So like, think about that shame that is already like, she felt shameful about her bagel choice to these like college teenagers who do not give a shit about what bagel she picks.
Yeah.
But they're like
the big boss.
Right.
Yeah. They're like the big boss to us.
Exactly. Cool teenage girl. Don't want her to judge me.
Your girl.
So that's where, and I did say like, Noah, this really is getting to the shameless trait of wild courage. And you should proudly enjoy whatever bagel you want. Like they don't care, right? There's a social psychological principle called the spotlight effect, meaning that like if you have a typo in your email and you're losing sleep, you send it to some big important person and you're losing sleep at night because like, oh my gosh, they think I'm incompetent. Well, you're thinking about your own typo that night. You've got a spotlight over your head. Yeah. Nobody is losing sleep thinking about your typo because by extension, they're thinking about their own typo, their own presentation to the client where they said too many times, their own XYZ mess up that day at work. They're not thinking about yours. That is the spotlight effect. People have a spotlight over their head. They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about them. So that person in the bagel shop was not thinking about Noah's flavor. They were thinking about something they were embarrassed about that day or whatever it is.
Jenny, as I read through the book, I'm like, and I've gotten to know him, like, God, you are bold and I mean, all the like shameless and courageous and all these fearless traits. Were you always that way?
So I think I've gone through phases. I met my husband by chasing a stranger off the New York City subway. People say, like, did you always chase strangers off the subway? No. And so I think it kind of depends on the context. I think that I gained, when you're more comfortable someplace, like, when I rose at Google for almost 2 decades, I was like, okay, this is one of the best companies in the world. I've been given a senior leadership position. That gave me a little bit of like bounce in my step and courage to I guess have more wild courage. But then the moment I left Google, Khe, like I've only been gone 9 months. I have so much imposter syndrome. The courage has like totally taken a nosedive because I feel like it goes back to a success mindset must precede success itself. I don't feel like I'm successful at all anymore. I think I'm back to square zero, trying to get keynotes, trying to
club.
Yeah, I know, right? Like it's
10 years.
Yeah, we have. Oh gosh, you're saying it doesn't get better in 10 years?
It doesn't get better.
Oh, Jesus. But I really just think it's contextual. Whereas I felt so emboldened at Google because I felt like I was already in this place of people trusting me or looking up to me or having a lot of responsibility. Now I feel like I'm a nobody, and the imposter syndrome and the courage, the lack of courage is raging.
Yeah. How do you, because I know that people listening and people reading their book, they're gonna look at us and be like, well, easy for them, a bunch of 40-year-old midlife, they've done the thing. But I'm 27 and I'm 2 promotions in, but I'm shy or I have an imposter syndrome. What's the relatable, like advice that we can give to these younger folks that are like, you guys make it seem so easy.
Okay.
But there must have been like a time when you were so scared to speak up that, like, how did you cross that chasm?
Okay. So rather than like the mindset shift to cross the chasm, can I just share some really practical tools that anybody can use, whether they're, 27 or 47?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So one is the Monday MiniFesto. And this is an email that I recommend you sending to your boss. If you're an introvert, it is totally an easy trick because it doesn't require chasing some VP down and asking them to mentor you as they walk down the hall after a big presentation. It's simply an email you spend 15 minutes writing every Monday that shares 4 bullets. 2 things you're proud of from last week, 2 things you're working on this week. That's it. Like, use numbers if you can, right? So rather than I'm working on the competitive analysis for our spring athleisure lineup, right? Whatever industry you're in. Say, I'm comparing 5 competitors and I'm 70% of the way there on this analysis. Like, your numbers don't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be $3 million of revenue growth. I'm comparing 5 competitors and I'm 70% of the way done with this analysis. It makes it concrete. Link to that analysis. Allow them to put comments in the doc or the spreadsheet. So 2 things you're proud of last week, 2 things that you're working on this week. People who do that are already in like the top 10% of communicating up, down, and across. And it just makes you look like a strategic leader. So that's number 1.
And there's an element, sorry to cut you off. There's an element of like, of just humble self-promotion.
Oh yeah, 100%. Or if you're a leader, I'll make this tip number 2. I call this think down, cheer up. Okay. So if you're a leader, think down to your team. So, hey team, incredible job on this vanilla ice cream launch push. So impressed that you got all the comms together. We got, 70 partners on board and blah, 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 right? Still use numbers. You thank your team, but then CC your manager and your manager's manager and be really thoughtful about the subject line. So something rather than like update ice cream launch, that's not exciting. Write your subject line as if you write a newsletter and you're optimizing for open rates. Okay. So internally at your company. So how about a subject line like this? I'm making it up here on the spot. Like huge win alert, massive ice cream launch with 5% more uptake than expected. Okay. Something like that. That's your subject line. CC your boss and your boss's boss. They want good news. They want to show that their team is working on cool stuff. They're going to pass that around. And then every time that gets passed around, that subject line reinforces the win that you are responsible for. So think down to your team, cheer up, meaning cheer your wins up above you just by who you CC and who you BCC. Okay. So that was number 2. Number 3, I absolutely love. And if you are early in your career, know that this can be learned. This is about tight communication. tight verbal communication, one of the best skills you can learn in your career. So, Khe, you can use this in an interview, in a mentorship conversation, even just when you come off of mute in a team meeting. So let's pretend you're my boss. It's called Tame the Octopus. I'm going to answer this question in two ways. The first way is going to be an untamed octopus with all the tentacles flying around and a super garbledy-gook answer. And then I'm going to have you ask me the same question again, and I'm going to answer it very differently in a much more buttoned up way. So Are you up for the challenge?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have to ask you a question?
Yeah, so I'm going to feed you the question. So let's just say something open-ended like you'd get in a team meeting. Let's say, Jenny, what are your biggest Q1 challenges? Something like that.
Okay. And so I'm doing the challenge.
You just ask me, Jenny, what are your biggest Q1 challenges?
Oh, Jenny, what are your biggest Q1 challenges?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's so much going on my team. It's a new team and we've got so many priorities and things we have to like separate and decide, what's more important, what's less important. And we've got OKRs, we've got goals, but we're not really clear on like which ones are most critical. And that reminds me that one of the things that is a goal of ours, but it's really hard to keep track of is our tooling and like what's internal, what we're doing with an API, what we're using AI for, what's a spreadsheet, what's first party, what's third party data. And the other thing that, has been keeping me up at night is because we sit across Asia and Paris and Buenos Aires and New York, people are doing things differently. So when it comes to the tools, we've got some teams doing it externally, some teams doing it internally, and that's chaotic. Blah, 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 right? Like you get how that is really tricky to follow. Let me ask you, how hard was that to understand?
Yeah, no, I was starting to doze off.
Yeah, dozing off, right? Checking that email. So that is an untamed octopus.
And is this for written word or spoken or both?
Well, I have a different tool, which if we have time, we can talk about for written. I can share that one really quickly, but this is just for verbal communication, which is so critical. Like if you want to be seen as a leader, tighten your verbal communication. So now ask me the same question again, please. Jenny, what are your biggest Q1 challenges? And I'll answer it differently.
Jenny, what are your biggest Q1 challenges?
Let me think about that for just a moment. Okay, so I'm writing some things down. Okay, my biggest Q1 challenges are number 1, priorities, number 2, tools, and number 3, global alignment. Priorities because we're a new team and we're struggling to separate the important from the unimportant. Tools because we're doing some things in-house and some things externally and we need to button that up. And finally, global alignment. Because we sit across Americas, Europe, and Asia, we should be working more in concert together, not against each other. So to summarize, priorities, tools, global alignment. How much easier was that to understand?
Yeah. And do you have a template for that? Or is that like just comes with practice?
It comes with practice, but anybody can learn this. Like you said, have you always been this bold? And to me, this is not even so much about boldness. It's about applying practical, tactical strategies that make you seem like you have wild courage, right? I answered that question in a way that sounded more strategic and more buttoned up and more bold and more authoritative, right? And what did I do there? So let me walk through the actual, like what happened. I paused. I had the wild courage to think to speak as opposed to speak to think. If you're in an interview, you could say, I'm going to think about that for a minute. I literally took 20 seconds and wrote down maybe 7 or 8 ideas, all the ramblings that I said initially. I then circled 3 that I wanted to talk about. When I started talking, I said just those 3. Then I went into a little snippet about them and wrapped up with just those 3 again. So I paused, I wrote them down, and then I started with just the 3. Like that is a specific strategy. And it makes you sound so much more confident, competent, and buttoned up. We think when we pause, we're going to sound less confident or less competent or like we don't know what we're doing. It's the opposite. And that is wild courage. Yeah.
You learn that as a podcaster a lot too.
Yeah, I bet. Right.
Last question for you.
Yeah.
So you have wild courage and you have these 9 traits.
Yeah.
But if you were to distill it into one actionable thing that our listeners can go and be like, I'm gonna take this thing into work today, into my business. What would be the thing that you really want them to take away from it all?
It is actually that last tool that I just shared. Okay. It is taming the octopus, because that verbal communication skill is one of the most critical skills you can learn if you want to grow in your company, as an entrepreneur, or in any area of life. And then it's also pushing past fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear of the judgment of others, because we don't lean into these traits, selfish, shameless, manipulative, bossy, reckless, because of our fear of being judged, that we might be that label, that be called that thing. That's why we don't do these things. That's why my daughter didn't ask for the chocolate chip bagel, because she was feared of being thought of as weird as a 7-year-old who would want according to her, babyish flavor. So it's pushing past the fear of judgment of others. And you said it a couple of minutes ago, it is all about breaking the unspoken rules, not the real rules. Pay your taxes on time, sign on the dotted line, but it's the unspoken rules that oftentimes hold people back within a company for sure, but in every other context in life as well. So push past the fear and break some rules.
Jenny, we're going to have to do a round 2 because as your time, like, we need like a podcast together.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine both of us in our corporate days. It would be like,
I would do a podcast with you. I do not want to start a podcast, but I'm literally saying it right now. I would do a podcast with you in a heartbeat if you ever want to do it.
Yeah. Okay. More to come on that. Stay tuned. Jenny, we're going to put it. Thank you so much. This is an incredible book. Again, saying the quiet part out loud, which is very rare in nonfiction these days. We will put all the links in the show notes in the description, but where can people go find more about you and Wild Courage?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love giving away freebies. So it's jennywood.com/get promoted. ITSJENNYWOOD.com/get promoted. We'll give you like an awesome, super dense packed in like the best way, scripts and tips and tricks to get promoted, and like actually a spreadsheet you can bring to your boss. You just copy and paste it. So I love giving that away. And then the book's available in hardcover, audio, ebook, anywhere books are sold. And if you're indifferent to format, pick up the hardcover. I'm shamelessly going to ask that because it helps the author the most, especially on week 1 that the book comes out.
Awesome. Jenny, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Khe.